The Fireball Sorcerer plows through AoE content, but what about the endgame? Why don't we talk about it? Starting out, our first 2 points go into Firebolt, and this is one of the ones that we enchant because we want the burning damage from it. Because believe it or not, Fireball does not make things light on fire. Obviously, we max out Fireball, and the rune that we're going with is Destructive because it's going to give us more crit damage. We have 1 point into Devastation so that we can get 3 into Dominance, and that's going to increase our damage when we cast things above half mana. And then 3 into Potent Warding because it adds a little bit to our resistances. By the way, right here, the other thing that we enchant is Fireball, so everything that dies is going to explode, dealing even more AoE damage, and this can chain react like crazy. So our 2 enchanted skills are Firebolt and Fireball. In the next part of the tree, we have 1 point into Flame Shield, and then we have 5 into Teleport, going with Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction. 3 into Glass Cannon is pretty standard on most sorcerers, as well as 1 point into Elemental Attunement. We have 1 point into Ice Armor with the Enhanced Ice Armor rune, and then 5 into Frost Nova with Mystical Frost Nova because we want that ability to apply Vulnerable to everything. On the next part of the tree, you actually don't get Ice Blades yet. You do this later when you get Tal Rasha's Ring. The only reason you use Ice Blades is to proc the Tal Rasha's 3rd or 4th stack of its damage booster. Otherwise, we have the traditional defensives, which is 1 into a line just so we can get 3 into Mana Shield and 3 into Protection. On the Mastery part of the tree, we take all of the fire passives with 3 into Inner Flames for the bonus damage while we're healthy, 3 into Devouring Blaze to give us even more critical strike damage against burning enemies, and then the 1 point into Crippling Flames. This is just going to add stagger to bosses sometimes. Now, in the ultimate part of the tree, you only go Inferno before you have Tal Rasha's Ring. Once you get Tal Rasha's Ring, you can get rid of Inferno and get Ice Blades or something that's going to proc the extra effect from Tal's Ring. And then the passives in this tree is 1 into Fiery Surge, but 3 into Soulfire. This is going to make your fire skills do more damage and cost less mana, and it's doubled if you stand still for long enough. And then for the key passive, we have Esu's Ferocity, which is going to give us bonus crit damage and crit chance based on our target's life. For the aspects on this one, the main one that we're going to use is 3 Curses because it's going to give us even more critical strike damage. And then a couple of the other offensive ones are Conceited to give you more damage with a barrier. Storm Swell is going to give us more vulnerable damage with a barrier. Control adds damage to crowd-controlled targets. And then Incendiary gives us a chance to regenerate some of our mana. As for the defensive aspects, if you need them, Disobedience for the armor bonus. Everliving is going to give us damage reduction from CC'd and vulnerable targets. And then Snow Veiled is going to give us a bunch of bonus armor whenever you use Ice Armor. As for the stats, in Season 4, as everybody should know by now, the stats were consolidated and made a little bit more easy to understand and easy to digest for the general public. And for people like me, this is a huge deal. So some of the offensive stats that we're looking for on this build is cooldown reduction, bonus to mana, and then critical stuff like crit damage and crit chance. Now, the defensive stats are pretty much straightforward on every single sorcerer build. You want cooldown reduction, armor, bonuses to your resistances, and then maximum life. For the Paragon board, normally it takes a long time to go through this, so I'm going to give a brief overview, but there will be a link to this build in the description to Maxroll so you can see their Paragon board. But starting out, it looks something like this. We have the Elementalist glyph here, which is very similar to Tal Rasha's, where it's going to give you bonus damage per element that you use. North of that, we have the Searing Heat board, and then the glyph that we're going to use with this one is Control, and this is going to give us bonus damage to crowd-controlled targets. To the right of that, we have Enchantment Master, and the glyph here is Reinforced. This is going to give us bonus damage, but also a lot to our defensive ability. South of that board is Frigid Fate, and the glyph that we have here is Tactician, and this is going to give us bonus defensives, but it's also going to give us more damage when we cast a defensive spell. To the right of that, we have the Burning Instinct board with the Destruction glyph, and this is going to give us even more critical strike damage. And north of that, we have the Ceaseless Conduit board with the Exploit glyph, and this is going to give us more vulnerable damage. And finally, we have the Static Surge board with my favorite glyph, Flame Feeder, and that's going to give us bonus damage to burning enemies. So like always, when it comes to the Paragon board, I just use Maxroll as a helpful guide. I will still change like 20 to 30 points and tailor it to my own experience, but really, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. This is just what I'm using to showcase this build. Now, for some of the end game gear that you really need to obtain for this build, because it is kind of relying on it, we have the Gloves of the Illuminator, and this makes your fireball bounce towards your target, so it explodes every time it bounces on the way to your target. This is a big one for this build. And then obviously we have Tal Rasha's Ring, which is going to give you bonus damage for every element that you cast, and this stacks up to 4 times. And after that, we have our uber uniques, like obviously Shaco is one of the biggest ones that you can get on pretty much every sorcerer build. But then you have the Ring of Starless Skies, and this is one that I've actually never even held before, so maybe that'll change this season. But this reduces the cost of all of your abilities up to 40% whenever you're using them. So basically at this point, it's just spam city. AoE. Now, the playstyle for this build was decently fun. You're basically playing Super Mario with the Fire Flower, but at an extreme level. And there really is almost no complexity to this at all. You literally just spam Fireball whenever you can and reposition when you don't have mana. You can use your defensives and the rest of your cooldowns as a mana battery if you're using Prodigy. And then you can use your Fire Snake ultimate if you're still using that, and that's going to give you unlimited mana whenever that is up. But like I said, other than that, it's extremely straightforward. There's really no modifiers or anything crazy that you have to do. You just cast fireballs. Now, that being said, objectively, this build does great AoE, and it's a bit faster than most other builds in that regard, although when it comes to bosses, it seems like you kind of hit a brick wall due to mana. I mean, this is one of the slower bosses that I think I tested out of all the builds. I did put it up on the pit clapometer, and while it was very slow at bossing, it still threw down an impressive 4 minutes and 39 seconds, putting it just above the middle of the pack so far. In my opinion, it actually was pretty fun to play this build for general farming and clearing in Helltides, but outside of those AoE instances, it was kind of generic, and it really felt like I was just eating at Applebee's. So I'm gonna give this one a solid like 4.5 out of 10. Now, obviously, my question is, what are you playing this season in Diablo 4? You'll have to let me know in the comments down below, and then also feel free to add anything you want to the conversation down there. And on your way, maybe like and subscribe because they're free and they really help out the channel here. Now, for those of you that want to go the extra mile, I try to stream once in a while here on YouTube, and the best way to stay up to date on that is join our Discord and pay attention to the announcements tab in there. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and if you're bored, YouTube is gonna recommend this next one for you. Happy grinding, travelers, and we'll see you in Sanctuary.